They resolved to profit by the Count's courtesy, and ordered the horses to be harnessed, while they substituted evening dress for that which they had on, and which was somewhat the worse for the numerous combats they had sustained. This precaution taken, they went to the theatre, and installed themselves in the Count's box. During the first act, the Countess G entered. Her first look was at the box, where she had seen the Count the previous evening, so that she perceived Franz and Albert in the place of the very person concerning whom she had expressed so strange an opinion to Franz. Her opera glass was so fixedly directed towards them, that Franz saw that it would be cruel not to satisfy her curiosity, and, availing himself to one of the privileges of the spectators of the Italian theatres, who used their boxes to hold receptions, the two friends went to pay their respects to the Countess. Scarcely had they entered, when she motioned to Franz to assume the seat of honor. Albert, in his turn, sat behind. "Well," said she, hardly giving Franz the time to sit down, "it seems you have nothing better to do than to make the acquaintance of this new Lord Ruthven, and you are already best friends in the world." "Without being so far advanced as that, my dear Countess," returned Franz, "I cannot deny that we have abused his good nature all day." "All day?" "Yes. This morning we breakfasted with him. We rode in his carriage all day, and now we have taken possession of his box." "You know him, then?" "Yes and no." "How so?" "It is a long story." "Tell it to me." "It would frighten you too much. So much more the reason. At least wait until the story has a conclusion." Countess G, I think you're going to be waiting a long time for that conclusion, as we aren't even 500 pages into a 1,500-page book yet. Wow. We have returned to the opera, a place I didn't expect to spend so much time in, and I didn't even really expect to see Countess G again, but here we are. I wonder if she has connections the way that Albert has connections to Villefort, and obviously Fernand. The impression that Dante is making on her certainly seems important in some regard. At this point, to reintroduce her isn't just to illustrate the effect to Franz as far as, like, be careful about this guy. Now it seems like when you return to an idea, it has larger meaning and function within your story. So I don't know that that's true, but I'm now very curious what is going to go on with Countess G. If she's going to make things more complicated, if she's going to get in the way of Franz and Dante, give him some information, put him in touch with someone. I don't know. But was not something I was expecting to encounter. I don't know if it was just me or if there is a slight flirtation between Countess G and Franz. It seemed kind of playful banter that they had, but might not be. It doesn't have to be romantic. In fact, I would find it much more interesting if it was just kind of a playful friendship they have. Other than that, not much to report on here. However, folks, I did myself some big ol' research, and I think I'm going to dole this out over a couple episodes. As we seem to be kind of in a weird transitionary chapter where I'm struggling to find some insightful commentary day after day. What I've done is followed up on something I earmarked to do research on, which was the idea of abridged versions. We've talked about translations already, of which there are a handful. We are reading the initial original anonymous translation into English that was first done. There's obviously translations into every language that the story appears in. I remember some folks on our Discord talking about reading it in different languages, and particularly I found it interesting when there are languages that have masculine and feminine forms of words, which one they choose to use and what kind of cultural significance that may or may not have. But translations aside, abridgment is a completely different thing. And if you really want to get complicated about it, there are probably different abridgments of different translations, and you can imagine the types of different reading experiences one can have when they pick up a copy of the Count of Monte Cristo. That's why I'm glad you're all here experiencing this with me day in and day out, so that we all have a shared experience, even though I am mostly in my podcast studio alone. And when I say mostly, I mean, totally, except for my cat who comes by sometimes. All right. Generally speaking, I feel like I'm going to make the basic things. It's going to make your eyes roll. But if we just need a definition, abridgment just generally means that the text has been cut down. So why do they do abridgments in the first place? I think I'll keep today's episode broadly about abridgments and then use some of the Monte Cristo specific abridgment notes in future episodes. Let's just talk about the reasons for abridgments to exist in the first place. The obvious one, length. Books are big. Monte Cristo is a doorstop. It's a big old book. I would dare say a tome. I mean, obviously tomes can be anything, but it's a thick old big boy of a book. And so shortening it makes it a bit more accessible, not only in terms of the amount of people that are likely to pick it up, but literally mobile. You can fit it in your pocket, your backpack. You can take it with you places. You don't have to hurt your little hands if you're me and always complaining about holding books. I think I'm getting early onset arthritis in my hands. I have taken to using a book stand to just hold on my lap while I read in the morning because my delicate little fingers start to hurt after a while. But there's more to it than just length and access. I mean, obviously, if you're shortening the book, it costs less to print, which means there can be more copies of it out in the world. If you want to talk more about access, there are more access points that open up when you shorten a book. For instance, have you ever read something in school that is different than when you read it when you're older? I, in fact, just unearthed a box of all my old childhood books. And when I say childhood, I mean like when I was a child being read to. And I opened up this one about fairy tales, and like there's a tale of Aladdin and Pinocchio and Robin Hood, and like these are, I would go further than saying they're even abridgments, but I think it illustrates the same point, which is you have a longer story like Pinocchio or Robin Hood or something like Aladdin from the Tales of 1001 Nights, and you pare it down to its essentials so that you can tell it to younger and younger audiences. You can get them into schools, you can get them into storybooks, and you're really just hitting a mass market at that point. I just realized something that I wanted to look up for this research and didn't, which is I'm curious if abridgments are falling out of popularity. I don't know. I bet there's like a very specific market for them, but I feel like if you're someone seeking out the classics nowadays, you probably are looking for complete and unabridged. I have so much more to talk about with abridgments. I think I'll just end with this one last piece about general abridgments, which is that sometimes you will get editorial ideology or cultural filtering when it comes to trimming down a book. And some editors, some publishing companies might say that they are improving the pace or removing superfluous things that might not translate well to modern audiences in terms of like the history portions of this story. In the abridged version that I have, the chapter, The 100 Days, and the chapter where we're with King Louis are still there. So at least the abridgment that I have retained that, but I can see like if you're cutting down something somewhere, take out that chapter where Villefort goes to the king, gets honored, and moves on. Like there's a lot of historical context there that doesn't necessarily move the plot forward. But editors and publishers can say that they're trying to improve the pace and overall digestion of these books, but there can be some nefarious underbelly to that. You could be removing religious context. You could be removing subplots or character arcs that maybe don't fit with your ideology. I point you in the direction of the early 2000s with a company called Cleanflix and other like-minded companies. If you're not familiar with Cleanflix, they essentially took Hollywood films and then removed all of the sexual content, the nudity, the violence, and profanity in order to fit a LDS agenda, or at least their standards. I would call it an agenda, but I'm not out to alienate anyone here. To me, I mean, that is editing something to fit your ideology. And I would imagine that hits that cultural filtering if you are putting something into another international market, into a culture that does not allow or want to glorify drugs or sex or moral ambiguous material at all. They're probably going to soften or trim stuff. These are all reasons that abridgments exist. That's all I've got for today. Join me here tomorrow as we near the middle point of chapter 36. So until then, okay, goodbye.